All right, we're live. We are live. You guys hear me on the chat? If you can hear me, let me know. If you can see us, let me know. Hello from the UK, Massachusetts, Netherlands, Ecuador, Turkey, Somalia. Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing out there? If you can hear me, let me know in the chat. Thank you, Valley S, for your super chat. That's a good way to start the chat right away. Thank you, Valley, for that. All right, Pat says, sounding and looking good. All right, I hope so. I ramped up my internet speed, so hopefully the quality is much better. And
that's kind of like the internet equivalent of Viagra, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Where I am right now, they just opened up in my neighborhood much more bandwidth, so I jumped on the opportunity. So hopefully this live chat will look and sound a lot better. Let's hope so, and let's get into it. Mm-hmm. India, Quebec, Slovenia, Ireland, California, Napa Valley. Hello, Kevin. From Berlin, Germany. From Dover, Kent. Pat Hacker. Hello, Pat. Hello, Mike. Vida, Isabella. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Duran Live 28. We hope everyone is having a good Monday and the week has started off really well. And we hope you're having a good month of March. Hopefully spring is coming close to you. For us here, the weather is nice. And speaking of weather, where I know the weather is always nice and always sunny and always warm in Moscow, say that sarcastically. In Moscow, we have the one, the only, Mr. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk. Peter, how are you doing this Monday evening?
Surviving still another blizzard, but that's par for the course. Normal weather.
Normal weather. Yeah, Moscow weather. Beautiful city. Unfortunately, the sun rarely shows itself.
52 days a year.
Yeah. Oh, it's all right. You got other great things there, aside from the sun.
Plenty to put a smile on your face.
That's right. All right. Hello, Yolanda from Poland. How are you? Hi, Robert. John, hello. All right. We have in London, the one, the only, the Oracle of London, Mr. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Hello, Alexander. How are you?
I'm very well. Here the weather's been changeable. Yesterday was a beautiful, typical London day, i.e. overcast, wet, cold, and the kind of weather that we always have at this time of year.
All right.
we kissed the Oracle's ring.
I think Cyprus gets the best weather, Alex. Definitely.
Three, yeah.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. That I agree with. Mm-hmm. Cyprus and Greece does have excellent weather. Mm-hmm. That we are blessed with. Yeah. All right, guys, let's start it up. We have a lot of news to get to. You can send us your super chats. We really appreciate it. Send us those super chats, and we will answer every super chat that you guys send. And don't forget to go to the Duran shop, buy a T-shirt. That really, really helps us out. It helps us create shows like this and create lives like this. And you can always donate to us on PayPal and Patreon as well. That also helps us out. If you guys, I see some people didn't get the notifications. Hopefully that gets fixed. That's out of our control. But we're working on ways that you guys can get the notifications outside of YouTube. And if you go to the description, we'll start explaining ways that you guys can download apps and get notifications outside of the YouTube notifications as well. So hopefully we can help add some redundancy to that problem. All right, let's get to some of the questions that everyone sent out before the live chat. And Peter, there was a question actually in the live, one of the first questions. This is an interesting one for you. Because we were talking about it with Tucker Carlson. And we were talking about that Dutch guy that did that. He tweeted out that video that Tucker was speaking to him, cursing at him off air. Actually, no, not off air. It was during the interview.
Yeah, but it wasn't live.
It wasn't live. It was pre-recorded. They decided not to air the interview, but that Dutch journalist, I don't know his name, he decided to put it on Twitter. Trey wanted to know, he's asking Peter, what did you think of that, what the Dutch journalist did?
I think what the Dutch journalist did was quite fine. I thought that Tucker he took the bait, and he shouldn't have done that. I mean, I have an enormous amount of respect for Tucker. Everyone knows that. It's the only signature news program that I watch from beginning to end. I thought Tucker could have handled it better. He shouldn't have taken the bait. He took it personally. And when someone throws and I experience this all the time in my own program, if someone throws a personal insult at you, you have to be adept in trying to move around it and go back to the argument and not blow off steam. Okay. And because then no one looks good at that about that. But it was a personal attack, and that happens when you're in the public sphere. And I think Tucker should have answered it better. As simple as that. And you and I discussed this.
Yeah, he took the bait. Yeah, definitely. Alexander, we have a question from Asma. What was your take on the Netanyahu visit to Moscow, and what were the outcomes, if there were any?
Now, this is a very interesting visit because, of course, we don't actually have a huge amount about it, at least not from the Russian media. If you go to the Kremlin website, the report was fairly short. Now, I think that it is important that Netanyahu, at this very difficult time for him, he's just been indicted on corruption charges in Israel. That's been looming over him. He's got a difficult election coming. He nonetheless felt the need to go to Moscow and speak with Putin there. And clearly what they're talking about primarily is Syria. And I think what the Russians and the Israelis are trying to do, what Netanyahu and Putin are trying to do, is they're trying to agree what the red lines are. Now, the Russians have always said that they will react very strongly if their personnel in Syria are ever put at risk, if the Syrian government's survival is put at risk, and if anti-terrorist operations carried out by the Syrian military are in any way prevented. I think they've also made it very clear to the Israelis at various other times that they will not interfere in Israeli actions against the Iranians in Syria, to the extent that there are any Iranians left in Syria, and Hezbollah and all of that. But after what happened back in September when the Ilyushin 20 was shot down, and after the Russians moved their S-300s into Syria and put Syrian personnel onto them, I think that not only emphasized the Russian red lines, but it has increased the complications about what the Israelis are permitted to get away with. So I think that there will have been a difficult negotiation between Putin and Netanyahu to sort all of that out, and I suspect they have to a great extent sorted it out. And of course, beyond that, the Russians anyway want to keep their relations with Israel on an even keel, because it is in their national interest that they should do so. So I think what we're seeing is classic diplomacy by two countries with conflicts, points of conflict between them, points of agreement between them. And I think the fact that they are talking to each other in this way is a sign that both of them take diplomacy seriously when they have to. And it's actually a good thing. That's my own take on it.
I think also, just to add on a couple of points here, is I think also both leaders discussed the on again, off again with American withdrawal. Probably both of them scratching their heads trying to figure out what that means. And of course, I think the subject of Turkey and Erdogan came up. And I think Netanyahu wanted to get maybe more of an inside view of what Putin thinks of what Erdogan is doing and not doing in northern Syria. So again, classical diplomacy, engagement, that's the best form of best way to mitigate problems in the future. I mean, the Americans could tear a page from that script. We'll talk about that later in this podcast.
Absolutely. Thomas, good morning. Alex, Peter, and Mr. Putin. Hello, Thomas. How are you? Mars, hopefully Bibi goes to jail. Mars Pluto. And this is an interesting question. Peter from Pat Hacker. Bibi is like the Clintons. He'll never see jail. What do you think of the Netanyahu scandal? Do you think that it's serious for Netanyahu, or you think he'll just...
Oh, yeah. I think that the fact that they went for an indictment, yeah. I mean, Israel has a really big problem with corruption. I mean, it's something you don't hear much in the Western media, but it has, when they have these transparency and corruption indices, Israel is in a group that they probably don't want to be associated with, like Zimbabwe or something like that. It's serious. With the indictment, it is very serious. But I think everyone should, I'm more interested in politics. I could care less about Benjamin Netanyahu personally. It's how will this impact Likud going into the election and its allies? Not much. Okay, I don't see Netanyahu's personal problems being a real big problem for his party because I mean there are plenty of knives coming out for him. A lot of people would like to take that position away from him. Okay, so it's more of a personal thing that he's facing. It's not really a political thing if you look at the election scenario and landscape that Israel faces. So I think, you know, it's I personally don't like Netanyahu for a wide variety of reasons, but it's really about Israeli politics, and for us making this podcast, Israel's foreign policy that is more important to me.
Right, guys, hit that like button and spread the word about the channel. Let's get people on here. And every time you hit that like button, it really helps us out a lot. It gets the word out about the Duran, and we appreciate it. So smash that like button. And Peter, one more question on this topic, kind of. What from Focus Farm Arabians, interesting name. What do the Russian people, not the oligarchs, think of Israel?
It's a country.
Please distinguish between the Jews and the Zionists, the question is. I don't know how much relevance that may have, but what do the Russian people think of Israel
look,
in general?
I mean, if you look at the post-Soviet space, okay, there's a lot of Jews from the former Soviet Union that immigrated to Israel. A lot of them are on the West Bank, actually. And it's a country. There's people have connections to it. Among my Russian friends living here for 20 years, there's not much talk about Israel as far as what it does like to the Palestinians or something like that. Israel, for the people that I know, that I've known in this country, it's about whether they have a personal connection to it, or do they have a relative there. Russian tourists are big in Israel. They like to go to Israel, so it's a destination that they like. But as far as talking about the way we would talk about geopolitics, about Israel's place, behavior in the Middle East, or Zionist ideology, I don't hear very much about that at all. And if you look at Russian media, there's a real balance because there are a lot of business. Russians have business interests in Israel and vice versa. But there is a tradition of being very sympathetic to the Palestinians. So I think they try to balance that. Those two issues there simultaneously, but it's not top of mind. I mean, most Russians think about what's going on in Russia and their livelihoods and their kids and their families and their future vacation, and they're going to get that new car and if they're going to refurbish their kitchen. That's what people talk about here.
Right. Alexander, we have a question from Andrew. What do you think about the suspicious Natasha Jaitt death? Is there anything that you can add about that? Because I read about it a little bit, and who knows? I mean, it's hard to make a judgment call at this point.
I'm a bit cynical about this story. I mean, as far as I can understand it, she's a former model who's been in porn magazines, and she seems to have had, shall we say, many gentlemen friends, and as she claims to have had information about the Argentine elite, and she tweeted that she was not going to commit suicide, and if she died suddenly, this would be a sign of that she'd been silenced in some way. I have to say, I've heard these kind of stories before. And when somebody goes around tweeting that they're, if they die suddenly, it's not because it's a suicide, to my mind, that is perhaps a sign that they've had suicide on their minds a bit. I am not able to comment in any substantial way about this. This is an Argentine internal story. I'm not actually, I have to be frank, terribly interested in it because I don't really know enough about it and about the internal situation in Argentina to comment. And one does come across people who make these kiss and tell allegations, and in Britain that's extremely common, by the way. You get this an awful lot here, and frankly I just don't take it very seriously.
Yeah, unfortunately, sleaze sells very well. Okay, I mean, for me, I took a quick look at it too, and I mean, it's a clickbait dream. Okay, I mean, that people like to talk about these things. I just stick with the facts, and I don't know, and the police don't know either. But of course, they could be in on the conspiracy. No, I just don't know. And I'm sorry, I'm not particularly interested in it either.
All right, guys, we are going to get to Justin Trudeau. I see everyone in the chat is pining. Let's get to. We're going to get to it very, very quickly. Let's answer a couple more questions that people sent in before we start this live chat, and we are going.
Let's Trudeau now.
No, let's do a couple more. Let's do a couple more questions.
I'm joking.
and we'll get to poor Justin very quickly. Peter, speaking about sleaze, Catherine wants to know, where is Imran Awan, that IT guy that Debbie Wasserman Schultz had under contract for a lot of money? Where did that guy go?
I'm sure he's in an undisclosed secret facility somewhere. He's in Pakistan with a sack full of money. I don't know. It seems to me that there's just simply too many people that just want him to go away. And I'm sure Pakistani intelligence and who else could be involved in looking through the computers and clouds of congressional members and staffers. I mean, that's got to be making somebody really happy. I'm sure there's a lot of extortion, attempted extortion, a lot of deals. I mean, the Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I mean, she's still around, remarkably enough.
Peter, what did you think of her? What did you think of her questioning Michael Cohen? Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
No, Liars Club.
Michael Cohen.
Liars Club. Okay, I mean, seriously. I mean, that is just beyond a circus. Okay, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I mean, so many powerful people were involved in this case that I think it's like too big to solve, because there's too many people going to be brought in. I'm sure what is being done now at many levels of the intelligence community bureaucracy is looking at damage, just what damage was done, and realize what information has been released or could be sold or released on the internet eventually. WikiLeaks has not fallen. But I think that's what it is. I mean, it's just so terribly embarrassing, and probably many laws were broken in the U.S. I mean, he's a con man, crook, everything in the book. But there's not enough interest to have this exposed, because too many people would be exposed to some very, very, at the very, very least, very embarrassing things, like pictures and stuff like that.
Good point. Or maybe having Chinese national chauffeurs driving them around.
Oh, yeah,
like what Feinstein had. All right. Thank you for the super chat, Jess. Alexander, same topic here, staying with the Russiagate collusion hoax. Alexander, in light of Dems and the deep state moving from collusion to obstruction, will Trump fight back? Example, declassify everything. Or what will he do? Thank you for that super chat. Guys, send us your super chats. We will try to answer all of them. Remember, hit that like button. Alexander, what do you think of that question?
I was very, very disappointed when he didn't declassify before. He said he was going to, and he didn't. And he pulled back right at the last moment. And I think that was a big mistake on his part. And I don't understand fully why he didn't do it. I hope that once we get this Mueller report, which apparently is now expected very soon, and which everybody, as far as I can see, now accepts is probably, almost certainly, going to fully clear Trump of collusion, we will be able to move forward, and that Trump will, at that point, use the fact that he's been cleared of collusion to go on the attack, will start to declassify all this information, will bring out all the various things that happened within the FBI, within the CIA, within the Democratic Party, within the media, and that we will finally start to see the truth in all of this, and that there will be a special counsel appointed to investigate it. Those are my hopes. I have to say they are hopes rather than expectations, because I've had expectations of Trump before and they were not realized.
I think what is very important here, if we could try to develop a scenario here, I think Trump and Giuliani and the rest of his legal team are waiting for the Mueller report to be given to the Attorney General. Let's be very careful here, because that's what's important. He gives it to the Attorney General. The Attorney General has the power to release it to the public, to release a redacted version, or to say, never mind, and he could do it. The interesting thing is that if a member, let's say the Gang of 8 in Congress, if they get a copy of it, they can read it on the floor of Congress, okay? They can do that's one way. It's an interesting way that you can get something into the public realm. The Pentagon Papers is a perfect example back in 1971. What is most important here? The Mueller report gets wrapped up, and then the cape comes on. Super William Barr hits the stage.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Trump is doing. He's going to basically let Barr do the job that Jeff Sessions never would do. And I also think that the document releases that we had been hoping for all the way back in September, Trump can drop those as electioneering bombs, okay, to constantly change the narrative. That's what he's a master at doing, controlling the narrative. And so he has a number of cards up his sleeve. So I think that's the way it's going to go. I echo Alexander Mercouris's feeling. I wish he had released these things earlier. But maybe he has a plan to use them as we go into the election cycle here. Maybe.
All right. Gobarwala, your episodes yesterday about Trudeau and the Vietnam summit were excellent. All right. Thank you, Gobarwala. We're glad you liked them. And before we get into the corruption of Justin Trudeau, Jeff Weber asks, Duran, a friend asked me yesterday, does Putin have billions from corruption? What do you make of that comment, Peter?
I went...
Or Alex...
Yeah.
Go ahead, Alexander. Go ahead, Alexander.
I did an exhaustive look into this some years ago, and I wrote I spent hours and hours going through every single allegation that's been made, going through all the paperwork. And my conclusion, and I stand by absolutely, is that he does not have billions. He does not even have millions. The whole thing is nonsense from start to finish. In fact, you can actually go back through all those allegations of the billions and see how they started, who was behind starting them. Initially, it was unquestionably Berezovsky and his group, and how these allegations gained traction and how they were embroidered and elaborated along the way. But I can say quite conclusively, to my mind, that he does not have those billions. If he had had billions or anything like that, it would have been found out by now. If you follow his movements and what he does and where he lives and with whom he stays, and it is very, very obvious that he does not have a private billionaire style. We should put that idea straight out of our minds.
Yeah, I mean, where's the footprint? I mean, that's what I always ask people. What's the footprint? Look, do you remember when Ronald Reagan, I guess I'm talking to Alexander Mercouris now, when he left office, what happened immediately after? He flew to California.
Yeah.
And what was waiting for him? A brand new house worth $2 million. Okay, that's what, 1989. Still $2 million house is nice. It was a gift. Because he has a lot of people that admired him, were devoted to him. A lot of people are devoted to Vladimir Putin as well. And so when he leaves the presidency, he will live very comfortably. I have no doubts about that. But the claims that he's done this all illegally and stuffed billions of dollars, where are they? Okay. I mean, as we always say on this podcast, give me the facts and then I'll analyze it. You don't give me your opinion. Okay, or trivialities. Okay, I don't know. There's no paper trail. There's no logic trail that I can find. Okay, I'm willing to be challenged by facts, and if someone has some facts, bring it to us.
Can I just add, Peter? And nobody has ever suggested that she was personally corrupt. Margaret Thatcher also received a house in Chester Court in London, worth much more than £2 million. We still don't.
Okay, Alex, can you hear me?
I think we lost Alexander.
Okay, he'll come back. He
froze up.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
You're back. You're back, Alexander.
I would say that Margaret Thatcher was also provided with a very, very opulent mansion in central London at a place called Chester Court. And nobody's ever suggested that she was corrupt. And certainly there was a private donor behind it, and we still don't know who that was. But can I just make a few points? I mean, they've looked for these secret billions in Cyprus. They've looked for them in Canada. They've looked for them in other in the Caribbean islands.
The Panama Papers, no smoking gun.
They are nowhere to be found. And I mean, they've attributed buildings to him in Krasnodar. They said that he's the owner of them, and it's been proved that he was not. There's no sign of private yachts, of private planes, of all of those things. The only thing he does have personally is that, like Peter, he's a watch collector, and he does have some nice watches. That's all one can definitely say. And
right.
a lot of money, he can afford them.
Laura Powers says Rachel Maddow said Putin has two $20 million homes on the French Riviera. Yeah, I think that's proof to know that Putin doesn't have those homes. If Rachel Maddow,
he's never visited them. Yeah. There's no firm attribution. Probably,
I guess she would know. She probably has homes there. Okay, she paid $30,000 an episode. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you, Laura, for that comment. We appreciate it. And while we're on the subject of corruption, Alexander mentioned a little Canada. We did a show on Trudeau the other day, and it was a really good show. And it's a really interesting story what's going on in Canada. And we don't have any intro music, Peter, for the Just for Trudeau segment.
I was going to suggest the Looney Tunes theme, okay, before the Roadrunner comes on, okay. I know you guys did a podcast on it here. I mean, for me, broadly speaking, it just shows the gross hypocrisy of this low-octane thinker. All right, he's not his father. As a matter of fact, I disagree with a lot of his father's politics. But you know what his father was? He was a leader. And he was an intellectual, and he understood his times. And Canada was going through some very difficult times at that moment. The Quebecois and all of this was going on. He was a leader. And I was just watching before we started this podcast. For some reason, I'm watching old episodes of Bill Buckley. And Bill Buckley was just a great, brilliant mind. And, the episode I was watching just before this was an analysis of Franklin D. Roosevelt. And he's very, very critical of Franklin D. Roosevelt because he's a staunch conservative. But even he said, but he was a leader. Okay, Justin Trudeau is not a leader. He is an empty suit. And with this scandal, which this woman, her first name is Jody, she has all the notes, all the emails, all the messages. And she's implicated a good part of the government. And I don't see any way around this. Trudeau has to match his actions with his words. Well, they're completely in opposition right now. He needs to step down if he wants his party to win the election later this year. You can't double speak your liberal gobbledygook liberalism to get out of a lie, Justin. Okay, so stop it. Okay, stop your programming. Your nonsense, politically correct, postmodernist, post-Marxist programming. Put it on pause and look at reality and do the right thing. But considering your ideological bent, you're not even able to do that. Okay, I'll express my opinion later in the podcast. Go ahead, Alexander.
Alexander, I saw the Justice Minister's testimony. She was very convincing.
Oh, absolutely. And can I just say, I mean, she is somebody who one has to give a great deal of respect for. I mean, she came under a huge amount of pressure from Justin Trudeau and his people to bend on all of this. And to her credit, she didn't. And of course, they got rid of her or tried to. And now she's coming.
Well, they did.
Well, they did. And I mean, she's coming forward now and she's telling the whole story. And I mean, she's doing it. She's acted in an entirely proper way. And really, the thing I would add about this, to the points that Peter was made, was that this was such a shifty, manipulative, low scandal. I mean, clearly all about, securing votes in advance of an election by keeping people in jobs, slowing down prosecutions, putting pressure on your attorney general, ignoring the fact that those people, your attorney general has public duties and ruthlessly sacrificing those in order to achieve your own political objectives. I mean, it doesn't just show that Justin Trudeau is a hypocrite, which he does. It also shows what a manipulative and ruthless political operator he actually is.
But he's not very good at it. Okay,
Well,
he's just simply not very good at it. I mean, it's almost a juvenile delinquent in office here. I mean, the thing is, let's be very clear here, and let's be honest. Governments and businesses have cozy relationships. Yes, okay. Businesses create jobs. Yes, okay. And to create jobs, you have taxpayers. Okay. But this goes much further. This is garden variety corruption. Basically, the election's coming up. This is a political issue that they've conflated the two and lied about it. Okay. Yes. That is the crime right here. This script wouldn't even make it into House of Cards, okay? Mm-hmm. It's garden variety corruption. You sway an election, and high public elected officials got caught. Yeah. All right? So own up to it. And yeah. It is this Attorney General, she seems completely credible to me, without grandstanding and without pursuing a political agenda of her own. I think and I would disagree with her politics, but I agree with her sense of morality. Bravo.
Yeah,
all right. Well, his approval ratings are dropping. The latest poll shows that his numbers are way down. The Canadian people are not buying it. But I think the big question for both of you guys to give us your thoughts is: do you think Trudeau will survive this scandal? And if so, do you think he'll survive the elections and become prime minister again?
I think he's going to throw some people under the bus, like he did her. Okay, so we'll just see how malicious he can be in light of his, soft and fuzzy ideological outlook and rhetoric here. We'll see what more damage he's willing to. I mean, remember what Watergate was all about, you guys. It really wasn't about a burglary of the DNC. It was the cover-up, and he has his Watergate now. How is he going? Is he going to continue the path of covering up? All right. I hope he does, because he'll throw himself under the bus. Okay. Political death by bus. Okay. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about Canadian politics to say whether his party will get rid of him, but I think they should do, because realistically, he's very damaged goods now. And I don't think the Canadian people will buy it at all. I think he will lose the election. I mean, I am considered sentimental on this about Canada, but I mean, I remember Pierre Trudeau, his father, who was a strong personality. I can just about remember, as from the 60s, one of the people I remember, Justin Pearson, who was before Trudeau, and what a formidable person he was. The idea that Justin Trudeau should be, in the shoes of these people is just stunning to me. And now that he has been found out in the way that he has, I just cannot believe that the Canadian people will accept it. But, I'm not Canadian. I don't know.
A comment from Colin is: Canada has always been respected as one of the world's most sensible and reliable countries. How on earth did Trudeau get there? Well, I think we asked that a lot about a lot of our leaders. Yeah, how on earth did they get there?
It's the zeitgeist. I mean, how did somebody? You can always say the same about Britain. I mean, a country with a tremendous history behind it, with tremendous political leaders. I mean, going back to the 1980s, Margaret Thatcher, even before Callaghan, who was prime minister before her. The mess that we've seen made of Brexit would not have happened in those days, because those were leaders. What we have nowadays are people who are not leaders, because they instead have to tick certain boxes. And if they tick those boxes and they do all the right virtue signaling along the way, then they are there as sort of substitute leaders. They don't have the power of decision anymore. So that's how Canada has fallen into it. As I said, a country in a world where we see people like Macron in France, Theresa May in Britain. Is it so surprising that we have people like Trudeau in Canada? I don't think so.
He obviously trafficked in his father's name. Okay. And the thing is that there's nothing wrong with trafficking in your family's name. But you should achieve something first to deserve the mantle. And I think he did the shortcut. Like a juvenile delinquent, he did the shortcut. And he didn't create a political base for himself. He didn't create a name for himself. He wasn't attached to any kind of great achievement. You know, I mean, for example, let's say Canada held the Olympics and he was head of the Olympic committee and they pulled it off, with sterling results. Okay, but I mean, nothing. All he said it was his name. Okay, and people have very strong memories of Pierre Trudeau. But like I said, they remembered him as a strong leader, and I think they were duped in believing that his nitwit son would be, comparable.
He's his nitwit son.
Well, he is. He's a nitwit. He's a complete buffoon. I've called him a fruitcake. He is.
The guy from Greenpeace the other day tweeted that AOC is a twit. I don't know if you guys saw that story.
Well, I saw that story, but the thing is about AOC, and now we can all have a good laugh about it because we always should laugh at Trudeau. But they're building her up. Okay, I think Fox News is making a really big mistake in the U.S. to give her an enormous amount of airtime. And I think they're building her up to crush her. I don't know. I mean, they tried to do that with Trump, and look what happened. There was a boomerang effect. There was a pushback. So her ideas are foolish. Okay, that's fine. But the way they treat her in the media, I think they should be more wise. Okay, because they're creating her into something that she isn't. All right.
They give her
they give her a platform, and we do remember. There goes my house slipper again. Okay, I lost my train of thought because my Chihuahua just stole my slippers. But remember the Trump derangement syndrome is so strong that people will gravitate what they think is the exact opposite, and she's being put up as being the exact opposite. Not that she can run in 2020, no. But she's cowing the Democratic Party, okay? And that shows, going back to low-octane nitwits, Schumer and Pelosi, just as Alexander Mercouris was saying, just check all the boxes there. No, she's working, AOC's working outside of the box, she colors outside the lines. That's exactly what Donald Trump did. So remember, it can be effective. And remember, be careful what you wish for, all right, in politics.
All right, let's get to some super chats. But before we get to those super chats, very quickly, Alexander from Terry asks, does Canada answer to the British Crown at all?
No, that was actually what Pierre Trudeau managed to do.
Right.
He repatriated the Canadian Constitution from Britain. So until the 1980s, 1982, I think,
yep.
The British Parliament actually had power to amend the Canadian Constitution. I mean, legally, Canada was practically a colony, and Pierre Trudeau brought it back, and now Canada is a sovereign state. The Queen is still the Queen of Canada, but she is purely a constitutional monarch.
She's still on the currency, right?
Sorry?
The Queen is still on the Canadian currency, I believe.
Oh, absolutely. She's the Queen of Canada, as she's the Queen of Australia. Whether that will continue for much longer, I don't know. But I mean, she is the constitutional monarch of Canada, but she has no effective power over Canada anymore.
Right,
okay, I want to point out to our viewers here, if you go right now to the American Conservative, to their homepage, excellent article on what some of the things that Alexander Mercouris was just talking about. The article is titled, Justin Trudeau Exposes Failures of Constitutional Patriotism. A very smart article here. It covers a lot of ground, and it's by a Benjamin L. Woodfinden. Take a look at it. It's really good stuff. Alexander Mercouris, that's your homework tonight. That's your homework tonight.
I'll put a link to it. I'll track it down. I'll put a link to it, Peter.
All right. Alexander, a super chat from Jess. Why does Imran Khan not crack down on terrorist groups, even when, bizarrely, both America and Iran stand shoulder to shoulder on this issue? This is another big story. Of course, you have India and Pakistan and the tensions there. Alexander.
Because he can't. I mean, he doesn't control the military, the Pakistani military, which is a state within the state in Pakistan. and they would have to do it, and he doesn't really control them, and they wouldn't do it because they have their own policies. The Pakistani intelligence agency, the ISI, has a long history of supporting these and manipulating these terrorist groups. Exactly, so they wouldn't do it. And we have to always remember that within Pakistan itself, there is a large Muslim fundamentalist community which provides a base of support for these people. Imran Khan is an intelligent man, perhaps a politician with great promise, but he is right at the beginning of his time as prime minister. He is an unusual figure for Pakistan. He does not have deep roots in the political system. It will be a very great struggle for him to consolidate his position as prime minister of Pakistan, and one should not expect more of him than he can deliver at this time.
All right. Peter, another super chat from Chosi. With the EU elections coming up, how damaging will the populist movement prove to be to the elite neoliberals?
I hope as much as possible. I wonder if Britain is going to participate in it. I mean, again, Theresa May screws everything up. Okay. She's going to screw up the European Parliament now. Good for her. Wow, her achievements are just extraordinary. I think that the different populist movements are going to do well here. And since we bring up the word, and maybe I feel like I need to qualify when we say the word populist. That's a very generic term, and it's not an ideology. Let's be careful about that. We can have parties that may apply populist techniques in its critique of the status quo and of the establishment. But if you go all through Europe, and we don't even have to mention all the countries, their variant of a populist movement can be very specific to their conditions where they are right now. So, people, particularly in the establishment and their pliant minions in the media, like to say that this word is a dirty word and a negative word. No, let's be very clear. These populist movements are challenging the status quo. Okay, I think that puts it a little bit more evenly and more measured. And as the European Union lacks any answers to the problems that they created for the majority of the citizenry, not for themselves. No. They live happily in their palatial homes, and they have gates and walls around them. The rest of the EU doesn't. So I think that this will be a very important year for alternatives, questioning the status quo and the status quo elites that want to hang on to what they have, because they are so ideologically blinded, they're so ideologically possessed, they cannot imagine that they are wrong. The people are wrong, and we have to teach them a lesson. This is what the crisis of Europe is all about, and the crisis of this post-modernity in Europe. And it's very, very serious. And they saw what happened with Trump, they saw what happened with Brexit, and they're just burying their head in the ground saying, oh, these are just one-offs. Okay, they're not. They're going to be the norm. And if you don't do anything about it, you'll be gone eventually. And then you'll have a very different Europe. And I'm not sure it would be a better one. I'll be very clear on that. Okay, but we're at a tension point that is breaking. And I think this year in Europe will tell us a lot.
And on that point, Alexander, we have a question from Jazz, again, a super chat on Brexit. What is going to happen on the 29th of March with Brexit? Since we're talking about breaking points, 29th of March, if it's going to hold true and Brexit does happen, what does that mean? What's going to happen?
I don't think anybody knows, and anybody who says they know are either delusional or are just lying. But I'm going to make a guess. And I think what will probably happen is that Theresa May, in about 7 days, will get this benighted deal of hers that has been rejected repeatedly through the House of Commons. Because I think what's going to happen is that the Conservative MPs who are strongly opposed to this deal, because they support a clean Brexit, are now very nervous about an extension beyond the 29th of March, and are very nervous about the Labour Party now supporting a second referendum. So rather than risk no Brexit at all, which is what might happen if there is an extension on the 29th of March, they will, through gritted teeth, vote for Theresa May's awful package. It will leave an enormous amount of anger and bitterness behind it. I am not absolutely sure that it will happen if they do vote for it, but I think that is the most likely prospect. If that is right, Britain will leave on the 29th of March, but on Theresa May's awful terms.
Alex, let me ask you a question with Jeremy's hint of possibly supporting a second referendum, second vote on it, a people's vote or whatever. How does that sit with the different elements of the Labour Party? I mean, it seems to me that he's a guy that, for all of the differences I have with him, it seems to me he's taking the easy way out.
Well, he has. He's caved, and it's not a hint. It's not a hint. It's official Labour policy now that they will support a second in the votes in the House of Commons. The answer is there are many people opposed to it within the Labour Party. That one can never be completely sure is that enough Labour MPs will rebel because they represent constituencies that voted Leave and will vote against the second referendum idea in the House of Commons when it's put to a vote, and that it will be defeated. There's talk that it could be as many as 70 Labour MPs will oppose it. And of course, if you go outside London to the working class northern English constituencies and Midlands constituencies, which are traditional Labour heartland, they voted heavily for Leave, and they are not happy about this switch at all. The fact is, Corbyn backed down. He came under intense pressure from Blairites in the party who threatened to defect and join the centrist group. And on top of all of that, as many people have pointed out, he is surrounded by a North London metropolitan elite of people within his office who are opposed to Brexit and who seem to be completely blind to move to opinion outside London.
Alexander,
it's what's really interesting, just a couple of sentences. At the end of the day, no matter what happens on March 29th, people's confidence in the democratic process has been indelibly damaged.
People have been very damaged. I mean, you often hear a lot of people say that there is no party in Parliament now which represents them anymore.
Yeah.
Alexander, Adam wants to know, what are the chances of May resigning this year?
I think that is extremely likely to happen. She has said that she will not lead the Conservatives into the next general election. We don't know when that will be, but I'm guessing that what will happen sometime in the next couple of weeks is that the pressure on Theresa May to go will increase. Now, either she gets this package of hers past Parliament within the next few weeks, in which case I think there'll be so much anger within the Conservative Party that they will try and persuade her to go before the May local elections, or alternatively, if there is a delay in Brexit, then what I think will happen is that you will see the pro-Brexit group within the Conservative Party making it very, very clear to Theresa May that her position is now untenable, and they will try to get one of their own people in and leading the Conservative Party in order to try and head off any moves for further extension beyond the extension that's already been granted.
So what you're saying is that they can't get a pro-Brexit prime minister after this miserable deal. What an amazing outcome.
Can I say, Peter, the disaster, the absolute disaster, was that after the referendum, when David Cameron resigned, the Brexiters within the Conservative Party all fell out amongst themselves, were not able to agree on a single candidate, so that we got instead Theresa May, a Remainer, as Prime Minister, supposedly to carry out Brexit. Now, that was a recipe for disaster, and it was made worse by certain aspects of Theresa May's personality. But hopefully they will not make that mistake a second time.
All right. Peter, a question from Catherine, shifting gears to Venezuela. I think it would be great if the random guy, she was referring to Mr. Juan Guaido, was led into Venezuela with no fuss. Will anyone notice then? I believe he is going to come back to Venezuela. Peter, what do you make of him returning back to Caracas?
I think the Caracas government is going to have to do something. Okay, I mean, he crossed the border illegally. He was under some kind of legal sanction not to leave. This will be the bridge incident was a turning point because the shock and awe of the coup failed miserably. Okay, miserably, embarrassingly. So this is going to be the next showtime, and the Caracas government is going to have to show that it is going to keep to its word. I mean, you can't just let people blatantly attempt to overthrow the legal government of the country with foreign assistance. I mean, that's called treason. And so they're going to have to do something. Maybe a halfway measure will be house arrest or something like that. So he'll know what Julian Assange feels. But I think the Caracas government is going to have to do something. You just can't let this happen with impunity.
Yeah. And to follow up to that question, Peter, then Alexander, I'd like your comments on this. There's a follow-up from Asma. It's on the same subject. I want to know to what level Russia is ready to support Venezuela. If the U.S. attacked Venezuela, would Russia intervene? Or are its limits are only vetoes and humanitarian aids at this point?
Look, I'll let Alexander go much deeper into this. Look, Russia has the capability, the military capability to project power about 1,500 kilometers from its border. So no, okay, it's not going to get involved in any kind of military adventure in Venezuela. Of course, they will be sympathetic, but there are limits to what Russia can do. Unfortunately, this is the case here. We should all hope for the real international community to condemn the jingoistic rhetoric coming from John Bolton. And I do want to talk about what Bolton said about the Monroe Doctrine at some point here. Go ahead, Alexander Mercouris.
Yes, I think actually you already said it very, very clearly, Peter. I mean, Russia does not have the military power to be able to project that power all the way to Venezuela. They can intervene in a place like Syria, which is reasonably close to Russia.
And when they're invited, okay.
And when they're invited, but I mean, to go all the way to Venezuela, halfway around the world, it's just not within the range of their power to do that. Nor can China do that, by the way. I mean, only the United States at the present time has a ability to project military power globally. Russia and China do not have that. But I always get a bit concerned when people say that, the only thing that Russia is doing is providing diplomatic support and humanitarian support. Those are very important things. The Russians and the Chinese, but especially the Russians, have been able to a very great extent to hold the line diplomatically on Venezuela. I mean, there has not been a great cascade of countries around the world recognizing Guaido and withdrawing diplomatic support from Maduro. That has largely happened because the Russians have been involved. The Russians are increasing, so far as one can tell, economic support for Venezuela to the extent that they can. The Venezuelan oil company is now relocating its European headquarters to Moscow. These are important things, and they should not be underestimated. Last but not least, I have to point out, when we talk about military action, the various Latin American states, Colombia, Brazil, all of them have essentially ruled it out. The Brazilian military, it turns out, is dead opposed and has made it very clear to Bolsonaro that it is completely opposed to this idea. And the Venezuelan military, which has been supplied by Russia, has, by Latin American standards, quite a lot of quite effective military equipment that, if it holds together, it should be able to use to quite good effect. It might not be a cakewalk. It might be a difficult thing for the United States to do by itself. It's opposed by the Latin American states. And the fact that the Russians, as I said, have played a key role in holding the line on Guaido's recognition makes it even less likely.
You know, one thing that was mentioned over the weekend, John Bolton was on one of the Sunday shows, and he said that the U.S. would be this administration is not embarrassed or not ashamed to throw around the term the Monroe Doctrine, which of course in everyday parlance we're taught in American schools. Even at universities, that this was the right of the United States not to allow, at that time, Europeans to meddle in the politics of newly formed democracy, newly formed countries in the wake of the Portuguese and Spanish colonization of South America. That is not true. Okay, I want to dispel a myth here, and I'm glad I have a platform to do it because it's very important. In 1823, there was the Monroe Doctrine. The historical context is the following. This was after the Napoleonic Wars, and you had the Holy Alliance of Austria, Prussia, and Russia that wanting to restore absolutism, the church. They basically wanted to go back before the French Revolution. And so the Monroe Doctrine was a reaction to that, saying, they will not allow European parties, European countries to export secularism, liberalism to the newly formed countries there. So John Bolton is talking out of his hat as usual. The Monroe Doctrine it's neither here nor there, and it is not a justification for American intervention into Venezuela. If anyone is violating the Monroe Doctrine in Latin America, it's the United States.
There you go. And Peter, I was going to ask you about the Monroe Doctrine, and I wanted you to tie it into Bolton and Pompeo because Catherine had a question about North Korea, really. And I wanted you to get into Venezuela and then shift to North Korea. And the question was about Bolton and Pompeo, whether you think they truly run the show for Trump's foreign policy, much like Cheney and Rumsfeld did for Bush.
Yeah, I saw the Vice film over the weekend. Interesting film. I think it's fair to say that Trump is being a CEO, because I think that's how he sees himself as president, the CEO of America. He's delegating, and I think he's delegated a lot out. He delegated North Korea out to Bolton. He's delegating a lot of the Middle East out to Pompeo. He's delegating Venezuela to Lindsey Graham. Marco Rubio, the boy. So I think that's how he sees himself, as delegating out. And unfortunately, he's limiting the options that are provided to him. And it works against his campaign promises. And we've said repeatedly for almost 2 years now that he's pretty concerned about keeping his promises. And by delegating out this kind of authority and power and influence to these individuals, he hurts his own currency, his own brand. So yes, I think from what we know in the public sphere, there's a lot of delegation going on. Yes.
All right, let's get to some super chats from Penguins fan Alexander. An update on Idlib and the rest of Syria, please.
Yes, well, we've had, as we heard earlier in the programs, discussions between the Russians and the Israelis, Putin and Netanyahu meeting. And Putin made some comments after that meeting to the media, which have not been widely reported, but he said that the terrorists in Syria are now confined to a small number of areas, and that they will in fact be dealing with Idlib fairly soon. He's confident that this will be the end of the line at Idlib. So I'm going to make a guess that the Russians, who've been, of course, speaking to the Turks and to the Iranians continuously, that they've also now been speaking to the Israelis, they're slowly ticking all the boxes so that we will now finally see this long promised clear up of Idlib, probably sometime within the next few weeks. Now, with Syria as a whole, we've of course had this latest statement from the United States that they're going to try and keep 400 troops in Syria. That's not going to play well in Turkey. I predict there will be more diplomatic pressure to actually get all American troops out of Syria. I think the Russians will take a back seat on that, and they'll let the Turks do all the heavy lifting. I predict there will be no US troops in Syria by the summer. I predict Idlib will probably be back under Syrian control by the summer. I predict there will be a deal done between the Syrians and the Kurds by the summer, and by this autumn, I think Syria will be at peace.
Okay, we're going to replay this tape in September.
Come September, we'll see if the Oracle's predictions play out.
That's a good. I think it's a very good scenario.
Good analysis.
Yeah.
Peter, a super chat from E-Ray. It was a good super chat, actually. It has been reported that Russia has bought large amounts of gold in the past several years. Do you think Russia plans to introduce a gold-backed ruble in the future?
It's one possibility. I think what this binge buying of gold, you got to remember Russia produces a lot of gold too, and it's actually heavily involved in the Venezuelan gold market as well. I think Russia is looking at all kinds of options because the current American administration is devaluing the dollar left and right, but by using it as a political tool for sanctioning countries and companies. So it's making the dollar less attractive. I mean, I've never heard of a country that was so hell bent on destroying its fiat currency. But you know, that's the way things go. I think Russia is looking at a number of options and see what they can do with it. What they want more than anything else is to cut themselves off from this toxic Western financial system. And they're made a lot of advances there. There's still plenty of people of affluence, very rich people. I don't like the term oligarch. I think it's really passé. But very wealthy people that still will accept cheap money from the West, and that's to Russia's detriment. So that's very much frowned upon. Also, the Russian government would like to repatriate a lot of money that has gone out of the country, which has always been a problem. So options, all these options are on the table.
Alexander, I know you have some comments on this as well.
I mean, it's actually very interesting. Yes, I mean the Russians have been increasing their gold reserves steadily over the last few years, and we are now moving to a post-war record in terms of the amount of reserves that they have. But something very, very remarkable happened in 2018, which is that the Russians have basically stopped collecting US Treasury bonds. In other words, though their reserves are increasing, the total size of their reserves are increasing, they don't like to hold them in US bonds or US currency. Now, since they don't want to have them in US currency, they have to have them in something else. Part of it, of course, is in euros. Part of it is in Chinese yuan. But a lot of it is gold. And for the first time last year, they seem to have gone out of Russia and actually bought gold on the international gold markets. In other words, physical gold. So instead of just, stockpiling gold that they were mining, they actually bought gold on the international gold markets. China has been doing the same thing. Turkey, interestingly, has been doing the same thing. So more and more countries are gradually moving away from dollars and treasury bonds in terms of their reserves back towards gold. And sooner or later, if this trend continues, it's difficult to avoid the conclusion that we're going to have some kind of, if you like, shadow gold standard starting to reappear, with gold replacing the dollar as the major reserve that central banks, non-Western central banks at least, are holding on to.
And that will spell the end of the petrodollar. Absolutely. Because it's that the Saudis will have to start thinking of diversification as well. Like I said, this is the U.S. is a country that is hell-bent on destroying its own currency. Go figure.
Yes.
All right. We're over an hour, guys. Click that like button, smash that like button, actually, and spread the word about the Duran channel. Get people on here, get people to watch our shows, and spread the word about the Duran. That helps us out a whole lot. Alexander, a question from Goberwala. Do you think that Imran Khan outmaneuvered Modi? I thought Modi's use of aircraft into Pakistan was reckless. By the way, young people in both countries were emphatically anti-war on social media.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
And given that we're talking about two nuclear powers, it's especially good to hear. I think that Modi was under enormous pressure to respond in some way, because, of course, what you had is a succession of terrorist incidents in Kashmir. I call them terrorist incidents. This particular one did target the Indian security forces, but the Indian government will consider that a terrorist act. And 46 Indian security force personnel were killed, and that did create problems for Modi within his political base. So given that he is supposedly a Hindu nationalist and an Indian nationalist, I think he felt under enormous pressure to respond robustly to what had happened, and that meant launching a airstrike on territory within Pakistan, which is accepted by India as being within Pakistan's borders. Now, I personally think that was the wrong way to approach this. I think there should have been instead a diplomatic initiative. I'm delighted to hear, as I said, that it's been opposed by so many people. I don't think one can say that Imran Khan outmaneuvered Modi, but I don't think what Modi did was wise.
Okay, let's get to some super chats from Penguins fan Peter. Oh, this one's an interesting one. When it comes to transgender bathroom thing, where does Russia stand on this? I have some comments on this too, but Peter, your thoughts?
There's a men's room and there's a ladies' room. And if you don't know which one to go to, you're in trouble, okay? And you'll get no sympathy here, all right? There's one very easy way to solve this problem globally. Thank God that problem isn't here, virtually not here. Just have a lock on the door, okay? Have 5 toilets, have 5 stalls with a lock on the door. You solve the whole thing. Have a sink in there so you can clean your hands. But this transgender nonsense, it's nonsense, and it's not going to come here. It would not be accepted. It's ridiculous. So in Russia, it's not a problem.
Yeah, when I was in Moscow, Peter, one of the things that struck me was how many bathrooms are unisex, even in Starbucks, and no one even thinks twice about it. If you go out at night to restaurants or even some of the nicest restaurants.
Yeah, but you're not having contact with the opposite sex. I mean, okay, like I said, you have the sink.
They're well structured.
In the stall.
Yeah, they're unisex, but they're well structured, and no one even thinks twice about it.
Why would they?
It's a non-issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you go to Moscow, if you travel to Moscow, St. Petersburg, you'll notice that a lot of restaurants, a lot of coffee shops, the bathrooms are just, men or women.
It just says WC, okay?
Exactly.
It doesn't say anything else.
Yeah. All right. Interesting super chat. Another super chat for Alexander. With Idlib about to be cleared from Al-Qaeda or rebels, as Al Jazeera calls it, how likely is another false flag chemical attack? Will the neocons use that as a way to stay in Syria?
It is a strong possibility. I mean, they've just managed to get another OPCW report saying that the Duma affair was a chemical attack, a chlorine attack. Yeah, which, by the way, I personally don't believe at all, for various reasons, which we can discuss more deeply, perhaps on a specific program. But I mean, it's a thing that has been repeatedly used. And why should it not be used again if they can get away with it? I will say what I think is the one thing that makes it, to a certain extent, less likely, which is that I think that Erdogan and Turkey, who are present in Idlib, do not want to see that happen, because they are looking now for a diplomatic solution.
Yeah, a way out.
A way out which will save Turkey's face. So they do not want, I think, to see this war prolonged much further, and I think they will not be happy to see another provocation of that kind being played. But Turkey is never an entirely reliable supporter in these things, and it's difficult to work with them. But having said that, they are present physically on the ground in Idlib province, and I think the word will have gone out from the Turkish military and the Turkish intelligence assets there that this kind of operation is not something that Ankara would welcome, and that anybody who wants to do that is basically on their own. That's my guess. I don't know that for a fact, and I come back to what I said. The danger is certainly there.
And Alexander, there's a follow-up question to that. What is the U.S. trying to gain from stopping refugees to leave the Rukban camp in Syria?
Well, I think the U.S. has a consistent policy of trying to keep the situation as tense and as unstable as possible, and also at the same time to show that it still has some kind of leverage, that it is still able to obstruct people coming and going to various places within their own country. And I think it's something that is outrageous. I think it is wrong. I think it should be condemned internationally. It is a tragedy and a crime that it is not being reported more.
Yeah, and staying on Syria, Peter, real quick before
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, before you comment on Alexander's, another question for you, Peter, on Syria, which is an interesting question. What do you think's happening to the ISIS fighters in the villages, in the last village? Is the U.S. killing them? Are they letting them walk? Are they going to get, MG's asking, will they get a makeup and reemerge again?
That's a very good question, and really no one has a good answer for that. Whatever uniforms they may have, they're probably shedding them, trying to blend into the environment, maybe to rise to fight another day. Erdogan's is waking up in the middle of the night in a sweat because they're probably moving north. Okay, so, and this is we keep talking about it. This is why he keeps talking with Putin. And Putin is saying, have you decided what you're going to do? Because you said you would do these things. All right. So that's a very good question. I don't think anyone has a good answer for. It depends on what Alexander Mercouris had to say. Would the U.S. and others see these people as possible leverage in the future and give them some kind of cover? Who knows? I mean, it's not beyond them. They've been doing it for years in Syria. It's the 31 flavors of jihadi. And maybe they're blending them into a new flavor right now. Good question. I don't have a good answer.
And I've got a question for both of you guys, because one of them's with the U.S., one's with the UK, and it's kind of a follow-up to this. You had the two, I don't know their names, but the two women, the young women who married the ISIS fighters, and one of them wants to get back to the U.S. One of them wants to get back to the U.S. Real quickly, what's your take on that?
Prison
nonsense? Time. Is it a story?
Prison time.
Yes, this is also my view. I mean, these people have been involved in an extremely violent terrorist organization, and they should be punished according to law. And I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. I don't think these people dispute that they were involved with a terrorist organization. In Britain, as I understand it, I'm not an expert on anti-terrorism law, but they're very sweeping here. And I understand mere membership of a terrorist organization is a criminal offense. And so it should be, if I may say. I mean, definitely. A long prison term is what she should be facing.
Well, I mean, I think we're talking about two different cases, and I'm not sure which one I'm remembering right now. But I mean, one of them was on Twitter and just trumpeting, the beheadings and the.
I think that was the UK case. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That was the UK, yeah.
I mean, I think that she just self-incriminated herself. Okay. She's an accessory at the very least. Okay. I have zero sympathy. Zero. That is just letting someone get away literally with murder or an accessory to murder. No, well, we've got to draw a line here. Okay. We either have law or we don't have law. And I don't pull my heartstrings on this. There's no way you can get me sympathetic to your involvement in a criminal terroristic enterprise. Full stop.
All right. Super chat from Chelsea. Peter, I think the Koch brothers, the Koch brothers Koch brothers are up to their necks in the attempted coup in Venezuela. What do you think?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, you know who one of their most important proteges in Washington is? Mike Pompeo. So let's connect some dots here, okay? Pompeo is essentially a mouthpiece for the Koch brothers. Okay, absolutely. I mean, he came, you know, the Koch brothers with the Tea Party and all this. You know, this is where we got Mike Pompeo. This is where we got the little boy Marco Rubio. They got their fingertips, their fingerprints all over these guys here. So yeah, no doubt about it.
All right, Alexander, a question from Asma. There is news that Gazprom Bank frozen PDV accounts in Rus. If so, then what is the benefit of moving the state oil firm PDV to Moscow?
Well, first of all, I want to make it very clear that those reports were denied by the Venezuelan oil company. Gazprom has not been very forthcoming about all of this, but we have a flat denial from the Venezuelans, and I presume that denial is correct. And the fact that they are moving their European headquarters from Lisbon to Moscow suggests that that denial is correct. Now, Venezuela is having a lot of trouble at the moment finding buyers for its oil. There was a deal done some years ago by Iran when it too found itself under a lot of trouble with sanctions for oil for goods with Russia. And I'm wondering whether we're not beginning to see something similar working out between Venezuela and Russia. In other words, the Venezuelans will provide their oil to Russia. The Russians will have to refine it because it's a difficult oil to refine, but no doubt they do have the technology to do that. And they will then resell it. And in return, they will provide goods to Venezuela through some sort of bartering process.
Yeah, okay. I think Gazprom Bank has come out and said that it has frozen those contracts. Okay, but Alexander Mercouris just gave the extension to the story. What will happen here is I think that they want to have not to connect it because Gazprom Bank has operations all over the world, even in the United States. So. Okay. It doesn't want to mix everything. Okay, it wants to have separate baskets, and so just what Alexander Mercouris had to say is that they're coming up with a mechanism where they can separate the financial, the transactions that Gazprom Bank was involved in, and put it into another some kind of facility, and to go through the process of what just Alexander Mercouris had to say. So they're making a big deal out of it. No, they're just going to find an alternative to Gazprom Bank. Full story. That I mean, it's pretty simple, and it isn't derogatory towards Venezuela or Russia or Gazprom Bank.
No.
All right, off topic, Pete. Yeah, Alexander.
Yeah, just quickly add that, of course, Venezuela's major partner in Russia is not Gazprom, but Rosneft, the national oil company, not Gazprom, which is a gas company. And of course, Gazprom Bank is a financial institution. So I suspect Rosneft will be involved in any deals that are done with Venezuela. And that's really the entity that one should be looking at.
Yeah, but they're going to be very careful to separate things out. They're not going to commingle these things because the greatest terrorist on earth is the U.S. Treasury Department. Okay, I say that with sarcasm. Okay, yeah. But you know, that's what they're worried about. Rosneft is going to be worried about the U.S. Treasury Department too.
Right, off topic, Peter from David. Peter, I know this has nothing to do with the conversation, but what is that thing in the background that rotates every so often?
It's a watch winder. It winds my watches. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. They wind my watches. Yeah, it's like a symphony. It's kind of cool. But they don't do it all. They do it for 3 minutes, then they stop, then they go in the other direction, stop. Then they go 3 minutes, then they go in the other direction. It's really hypnotic, okay?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
I think one of the people in the chat actually said something like, it's there to hypnotize us. All right, it's there to hypnotize you, so you guys can hit that.
No, I mean, if
hit that like button.
You can see the calluses on my index finger and my thumb from winding watches, so I got a little bit of help here. I was like, I'm going to look like I'm a street sweeper or something. Okay.
All right. Good question. Good question. Alexander from Afro Priapus. How will the Aegean conflict of increasing the Greek zone from 6 to 12 miles be resolved with Turkey? This would have no naval access to Turkey from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea.
Well, the way it should be resolved is through negotiations between Greece and Turkey. The great problem,
that'll be fun.
The great problem is that with Tsipras in charge in Greece and with Erdogan in charge in Turkey, negotiations are never going to be an easy thing. There are always right ways around these problems, if problems they actually are. If we look at Turkey, I mean, there used to be historically a major issue about ships passing through the Turkish Straits, the Dardanelles. And in the 1930s, negotiations took place and a way was found around that. And in fact, the Dardanelles is now a secure waterway whilst remaining Turkish national waters. You could do the same. If Greece and Turkey were friends, then it would not be a problem. At the moment, the relations are very bad. And as I said, Erdogan has made some extraordinarily aggressive comments about Greece recently. And as we have seen, Tsipras is a disastrous negotiator.
Well, there you go.
That's an understatement.
That's an Aegean solution to an Aegean problem.
That's right. And we have a super chat from Penguins fan, Peter. Who is Alexander Nevsky and why is he a Russian hero?
Well, he's a great general and one of the greatest generals of all time. And actually, probably, I think Alexander Mercouris would agree with me, establishes a military tradition in Russia. So, yeah, I mean, everybody knows who he is. There's statues everywhere. And the longest street in Russia is Nevsky Prospect in St. Petersburg. Okay. I mean, it never ends. Okay. Yeah. And so he's probably the greatest military hero. My greatest is Zhukov. I think he was the greatest general in modern history.
Yeah. Just a few things. I mean, first of all, can I strongly recommend to everybody the great film that was made by Sergei Eisenstein with Prokofiev providing the music, Nikolai Cherkasov acting in the role. Nikolai Cherkasov, by the way, was somebody my father once met in the 50s. Very great Russian actor.
Oh, boastful. Absolutely.
The film that was produced just before the start of the Second World War to rally the Russian people to the prospect of a German invasion. Now, one of the reasons which, Alexander Nevsky is such an admired figure in Russia is, firstly, of course, he was everything that Peter said, a great general, a great political leader, but he also took Russia at a time when it was in a very, very bad way. It had been conquered by the Mongols, and the Russian state that had existed up to that time had been destroyed. And such Russian statelets as were left still in existence were vassals of the Mongol Khan. And at the same time, Russia was under attack from the west by the Teutonic Knights, who were a Germanic, aggressive Christian order that were encroaching onto the Slav and Orthodox lands. So Alexander Nevsky rallied the Russian people at this very low point in their history and succeeded in throwing back the Germans and giving them back a lot of their self-confidence, the self-confidence that they had lost. And this started the train of events, which eventually led to Russia once again being re-established as a strong independent state again. So Russia has a long history of having to struggle against invaders. Alexander Nevsky is a key figure in all of this. So, of course, is Marshal Zhukov, who Peter referred to.
No,
the Germans in similar circumstances.
The film that you're talking about, I want to stress this because it's really important. That was a tipping point that Stalin employed during the war, because up until the war there was this de-Russification. I mean, the Bolsheviks had contempt for Russian culture, absolute contempt for it, and they had contempt for the Orthodox Church, and they tried to the old Russian bourgeoisie culture that they so much condemned. They made a complete turnaround, and showing this film of the great general, it was a rallying cry. And at the same time, the churches were reopened, and the bells were, they stopped destroying the churches, and they actually reinstalled, when they needed metal for tanks, they reinstalled bells to call the faithful, to pray for the soldiers, actually even to pray for Stalin to win the war. It's really remarkable. To the generation living today, they know that film, and they know the significance of that film and the significance of what that general meant to Russian culture and history to this day.
Well, let's bring it up to modern times. From Penguins Fan, a super chat update on Ukraine, Peter. What's happening in Ukraine? Elections are coming up.
Well, there's another circus there, Kabuki Theater at its best. I thought it was really remarkable that the Atlantic Council last couple of days dumped on Poroshenko. You saw I put that on Facebook. Absolutely made me laugh hysterically. They really don't know. The West doesn't really know what to do. Poroshenko is a complete disaster. He's more corrupt than he was before. He had himself installed as president as a result of the coup against the previous government. Ukraine is more corrupt. We have a comedian that's running in first place as a candidate, and the ever-present gas princess, Yulia Tymoshenko. I mean, the West will be satisfied with either one of them, okay? Even with Poroshenko, okay? Because there's not really much of an option. There's no real alternative. It's just really, it's a crowd of thieves and a comedian running for president now in Ukraine. What we will be watching very closely is to see if Poroshenko is going to pull a national emergency stunt prior to the election, to either have the election postponed or moved forward. I wouldn't put him past him. I wouldn't put, because he's looking at a pink slip here, a pink slip big time. And whoever comes in after him is going to go after Poroshenko. So he better have those multiple passports and those private planes fueled and ready to take off the tarmac, because once he loses power, they're going to go after him with knives, and it is not going to be pretty. And you know what? That's going to happen to whoever follows him, okay? And whoever follows that person, okay? Until Ukraine gets its act together. The worst thing that ever happened to Ukraine, and now I'm going to get death threats from Ukraine, the worst thing about their post-Soviet experience is they didn't have a Putin that would take on real oligarchs. That's their biggest mistake.
Alexander?
No, I agree, and I'm going to add that because Poroshenko is such a deeply compromised and implicated man, as Peter says, a man with blood on his hands. I mean, we mustn't forget that. If anybody in Ukraine wants to change the policies, in any way wants to blame any of the debacles in the war in the East, well, they've got Poroshenko there, and he's got all the history. He's been involved in so many things. I mean, he could easily find himself on trial.
Yeah.
And the stakes in this election are extremely high. I think he's going to pull out all stops to stay in office, stay in power. Who is the president of Belarus has said that he thinks, essentially for that reason, Poroshenko will probably somehow manage to cling on in some way. Not because he's popular, not because he's supported. The Atlantic article, as Peter said, showed exactly what a disastrous president he is, but because he is so compromised and so many people around him are compromised. But even if he is replaced, it's sad to say this, there's no real sign of anything getting better. Behind this man, Zelensky, there is another oligarch, Kolomoisky, who is every bit as ruthless and as corrupt as Poroshenko is. Tymoshenko, the other option, has a terrible record. And in the meantime, the economic facts show that people's living standards in Ukraine continue to get worse through most of Ukraine, except for a few pockets here and there. and the emigration from Ukraine is now reaching catastrophic levels. It is a heartbreaking and tragic story. Ukrainian oligarchs are implicated in it, but so it must be stressed are the Western powers.
Yep.
Instead of helping the situation and working to make it better, contrived out of the anti-Russian policy they became fixated in to make it far, far worse.
You know, do you guys know which countries the Ukrainians are immigrating to in Europe? Mostly,
the biggest country is Russia. There are said to be now 4 million people from Ukrainians in Russia. Many more than the actual figures show.
Poland?
Poland is another. I was going to say Poland is the other place where a lot of them go.
Okay. Alexander from Goberwala, what do you make of the Canadian case moving forward against Huawei executive in Vancouver, and how about her suing the Canadian government?
Well, indeed, that is the latest report that she is going to sue. Well, can I just make an obvious point, going back to the discussion we had earlier on the program, that here we have with the Justin Trudeau scandal proof that Justin Trudeau does interfere in legal processes. I suspect the same thing happened with the Huawei case. If that comes out, which it may very well do, through the system of discovery that takes place in these legal proceedings, well, Justin Trudeau's problems are only going to get worse. And of course, any compensation that Canada, the Canadian state, may be obliged to pay to Huawei, well, the prospect of that may increase and the bill might get even higher. But I mean, the fact of the matter is there's been a concerted attack on Huawei all around the world. It's been interesting to see that after an initial wobble, the Europeans have stiffened about this and do not seem to be joining in this a generalized attack on Huawei. That leaves Canada
holding the bag
as the one country that went along with the United States in this. And Peter, Alex, and I, in program after program, all three of us have said, what a mistake Trudeau made for Canada when he joined this bandwagon. And all the evidence is that we're going to see more evidence of that mistake in the weeks and months that will follow.
And
Peter, you want to follow on?
Yeah, do you think Donald Trump's going to save Justin Trudeau? Oh, man, this guy's walked into it. You know, the irony of ironies of all this here is that we've had this 2-year witch hunt fake scandal with Russiagate in the United States, but we have a real one in Canada, okay, with real forensic evidence and witnesses. The irony of it all.
Yeah. From Robin Peter, a question about North Korea. I just read that North Korea has deposits of rare earth metals worth $6 to $8 trillion. Is that what the neocons are really after there? And does that explain their resistance to a peace?
I think really if we look very, very broadly at what's going on or what could happen on the Korean Peninsula is what really divides the people even more, but it's actually a more interesting intellectual debate, not like what you find on American cable TV, is what would a unified Korea be all about? And there are rare earths deposits in North Korea. I don't know what the estimated value is, but would a unified Korea be neutral? Would it be pro-Western? Would it be pro-China? And this is what makes geopolitical thinkers stay up late at night, because there's quite a few scenarios that could be played out here that would be geopolitically very important for the entire region. And this would impact whatever side it would go on, the three variants, how America's allies, like, for example, Japan, would feel about it. And of course, China doesn't want to see a Washington-friendly Korean Peninsula on its border. So as I said in my crosstalk last week, I had some really smart people on it, and we all kind of came to the conclusion that what the neocons want is they like the status quo. That's what they like. If it's not broken, why fix it? That's the way, because they like the tension, they like the arms expenditures, they like having South Korea as a vassal state. They like being able to control its defense policy. It's on the doorstep of Korea, of China, which they like very much. They can keep an eye on the Russians as well, and they keep their alliance together. So the status quo for the neocons is what they prefer. They prefer that because that's their only winning card. Because if we go into the scenario that I mentioned just earlier about what kind of Korea could come out of this, that is a scary thought because they can't control it. Oh my God, the Korean people might have agency and decide their own future. This is John Bolton's greatest nightmare.
All right.
Can I just add? Peter's absolutely right. I mean, I have actually a family connection to Korea. And I traveled there some years ago. And the thing that really struck me about South Korea, not North Korea, was that, first of all, it is a proudly independent society.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very much so. Secondly, US influence is extremely on the surface. It is very thin. Whereas Chinese influence, culture is enormously strong. I don't mean that the Korean people are going to be vassals or satellites of China, but I mean they are much more part of the Chinese world than they are of the American one. And I think a united Korea, independent of the United States, would be a huge economic powerhouse.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that is something that do not want to see at all. Far more than any desire for rare earths in North Korea, it is the fear of losing South Korea that really scares them.
You know, the interesting thing is because if you have, you have to, when you think of Samsung, they make great phones, like the Galaxy phone, they're great, okay? But that is really South Korea incorporated, all right? I mean, they have cutting edge technologies. They've created a very modern society. And to the north, they have what would be essentially a very cheap workforce. Now, you put those two together. Now, of course, reconstruction and unification would be terribly expensive, but having the entire peninsula march into the same orders there, that would be an economic powerhouse that even China doesn't want to contemplate, okay? Mm-hmm. Also, so, what's best for the Korean people may not be good for everybody else around them, unfortunately.
From Vasia, 3 excellent classic Russian movies are Ballad of a Soldier, Sutka Cheloveka, and The Father of a Soldier. Alexander and Peter, a lot of people in the chat, this is why I'm saying this, a lot of people in the chat are interested in what's going on in Belarus, its relations with Russia, Lukashenko's relations with Putin, and Belarus and Ukraine. Do you guys have any comment or any updates on Belarus and its relation to the EU, actually, by the way?
Well,
as to what Belarus' position.
Belarus is a very small country. It's a small population. Its geopolitical, its location is advantageous. We've said this before. Every couple of years, Lukashenko makes these overtures to the West and kind of gives the cold shoulder to the Russians, and then things fall back to normal again, and then he starts up again. So, the tension that Russia and Belarus have is that Lukashenko essentially wants a free lunch. He wants to take advantage of Russia's largesse, like pipelines or refineries and things like that, and to entice the Europeans to be friendly and talk nice to him. He shows that he can stand up to the Russians. Well, it's kind of silly, and no one ever takes it ever very seriously. Oh, if you go to Radio Free Europe, their website, they'll be cheering up and down in orgasmic laughter that Putin might lose Belarus. Well, no, that's not going to happen. Okay, Belarus isn't moving anywhere. It's not moving to the east. It's not going to the west. It's staying right where it is, and I don't see any major changes there. Belarus is a state-run country that has a modicum of success. I hate people going to hate me saying this, but I mean, it's kind of like going to the 1950s in a way. I mean, it's not a very high octane place. Okay, but they have a lot of social services that are subsidized by the state, and perks that give to the population. It'll under the system it has right now, it will never be rich, but it is not, in the gutter either. So they just kind of move along with their state owned and controlled economy. It's not like you can't have your own business there, but I mean it's far and few in between. It's AOC's place. Okay, low octane, low growth, low initiative, low AOC.
Alexander, before you comment on that, Alexander, before you tag on that, can you comment on the Belarus business as usual with Ukraine? Recent reports say that Belarus sells anti-tank missile launchers and guided missiles.
We talked about that last week. Yeah.
T-64 tanks, yes, to the Donbass.
Yeah,
corruption.
Yes, I know. I think Peter got it actually exactly right on the last week. I mean, this is almost certainly Ukrainians selling anti-tank missiles to themselves and pretending that they've come from Belarus. This sort of thing goes on all the time in this part of the world, and we shouldn't take these stories too seriously. Peter, by the way, is absolutely right in what he said about how the Belarus, Lukashenko, uses the European bogey to milk the Russians. And this is exactly what he's done. And just to update this, over the last day or so, he's turned around and asked the Russians for a $600 million loan. This is exactly what he always does. So we go through this extraordinary dance that he plays every couple of years when he needs money from the Russians. He says, if you don't give me lots and lots of money, I will go to the Europeans. And so the Russians, they never give him everything he wants, but they give him enough. And if Belarus manages to tinker along the way Peter says, it's partly because, Lukashenko is not a bad manager, but he is very heavily subsidized by Russia.
And you can comment on the movies as well, Alexander, if you'd like, because I know that you know a lot about Russian.
Well, I think
he has the greatest advisor in the world, his wife.
All three are great movies. Ballad of a Soldier, I think, is one of the most moving films I have ever seen. I mean, it is wonderful. If you want to get a sense of the Second World War and its feeling for what happened in Russia, it's a great film. I think Bondarchuk, who did the War and Peace, was the director. And can I just say also, the greatest war films, the people who make the greatest war films, bar none, are the Russians. And I would strongly recommend even modern war films are just wonderful. The Russians understand how to show war. They don't romanticize it or sentimentalize it. And they do this marvelously. Now, I wouldn't say that they are the only great Russian films. There are some really remarkable ones, other ones. I mean, I saw an amazing Russian film recently made in the 50s, an adaptation of Don Quixote, for example. Very surprising to me that they would know how to do a film like that. But Russia does have a genius in cinema.
Yeah, I really want to stress, because I'm not a cinema expert, but Alexander Mercouris is right, is that there's no glorification of war here, and they show the cold, stark reality of it, and that's what makes it moving. They don't make Saving Private Ryan war films. Okay, that's just something they wouldn't do. Wouldn't go down here at all. People would be actually very angry because. And we've mentioned it so many times here, is it's called the Great Patriotic War, the Second World War here, and that is just seared into the consciousness of this population. And you wherever you go in this country, this vast country, you are reminded of the Second World War all the time, all of the time. It's everywhere around you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dissonance says, can Peter Lavelle get me into Russia? And Rainy Steps says, yes, if you give him a watch. Is that true, Peter? Is your entrance to Russia a watch?
No, that used to be Mikhail Saakashvili's thing. Okay, give me a watch and I'll do what you want. Okay, nope. God, just go to your closest consulate and get a visa and come. All right, that's what people say. Pete, I get this question all the time on Facebook. How can I defect to Russia? You don't have to defect. You just have to get a visa and buy a plane ticket. Okay, it's as simple as that.
It's actually getting a tourist visa to Russia is a pretty straightforward process. And can I just say the visa office in London, the people there are extremely helpful. I mean, you're given a form, but they'll basically tell you how to fill it. They'll explain all the things you have to say. If you encounter it, it's not a difficult or challenging thing to go to Russia, at least to Moscow and St. Petersburg.
All right. Luch says that Ballad of a Soldier is my favorite movie of all time, too. All right.
Good case.
A movie worth seeing then. Peter, do you think the Golan Heights will ever be returned to Syria?
Not anytime soon. No. Unfortunately, because there's, you have the heavy hitters on the international stage. I mean, the United States, I don't think they've technically recognized the annexation, but they probably will eventually. No, it's really shameful how Israel is gross disregard for international law and the sovereignty of other countries. And we've mentioned this on our podcast before, as a result of them stirring the pot in Syria, the most significant change since the advent of the Israeli state is that they've lost supremacy in the air, and that is their own fault. They lost that supremacy by their meddling and stirring the pot in Syria. So again, be careful what you wish for.
Right, and Peter, a super chat question from Penguins fan. Okay. Did Russia play a part in the U.S. Revolution in 1776 or the Civil War in 1861 to 65?
Russia! No, I don't think so. No. After the Americans got their independence from the terrible British people, Alexander Mercouris is Greek. Russia and the United States established diplomatic relations, really quite honest. One of the first countries that the United States had diplomatic relations with. So, it's really unfortunate because they had good relations for a very long time. And it was the Cold War. And of course, this, wanting to maintain the post-Cold War unipolar moment, which has created all this ridiculous Russophobia and fear. It's so laughable. I mean, we even had a program that we were doing on North Korea last week. It was really good guess. And one of my guests said, and apparently, there was like 90,000 bottles of vodka that were intercepted in Belgium going to North Korea. And I said, no, I think it was 85,000 bottles of vodka, and it was going through the Netherlands. And one of my guests said, Russian meddling. And he's actually kind of a neocon-like guy, and he thought it was funny too. I mean, everything is meddling. So no, I mean, these two, as de Tocqueville wrote about Russia and the United States being the futures of human civilization. He said that they had a lot in common, and he said that way before the United States and Russia ever were adversaries.
All right, thank you for the super chat, Penguins fan. Interesting question. Yeah,
a little to that actually, because what happened during the independence war was that the Empress of Russia, who was Catherine the Great, declared an armed neutrality, which in effect stopped the British getting naval supplies from the Baltic, which was very important for the Royal Navy during the American War of Independence. So that played a certain role. It wasn't a huge intervention.
But that wasn't pro-American, it was anti-British. Okay.
It wasn't pro-American, it was more pro-British. In the Civil War, the US Russia very, very strongly backed the North. They were the big diplomatic and political allies of Lincoln and of the North during the Civil War, because again, it was an anti-British thing. The Russians had just fought the Crimean War with the British, and they didn't want to see the United States break up, because if they did, they feared that that would lead to an expansion of British power. And they did play a certain role. There was even, I think, a Russian fleet floated around.
Yeah, but that was ceremonial. It was a act of solidarity. Because I have had some of my Russian friends saying, we saved the Union, and I said, no, you put on a good parade. Okay.
All right. Great question, Penguins fan. You learn a lot.
Smart.
You learn a lot on this show. Absolutely. That was a great question. Rainy Steps super chat. Love your show. Thank you very much for that super chat. And Alexander, Nadler is going to, I think, subpoena 60 people. And he's going to continue the Trump investigation now on obstruction. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that this is well, we have an expression in England, flogging a dead horse, because this is what is going to happen. I mean, we've had 2 years of investigations by Robert Mueller. All the signs are that he's going to say that there was no collusion. He's going to say that there was no obstruction either. The Attorney General, William Barr, has already made it very clear that he doesn't think there's obstruction. And yet the Democrats, who have insisted relentlessly that Mueller must be allowed to give his report and his investigation should not be obstructed. Apparently now they're not going to accept that outcome, and they're going to start investigations of their own. I think the American people, even many of them who are very hostile to Trump, are going to get completely bored and fed up with this thing. And I think it's going to horribly backfire. I mean, reinvestigating the same thing again and again and again until you get the outcome you want. I think the whole thing will lose all credibility. And of course, putting lots of people through the grinder of subpoenas, which is a daunting thing, I think that's also cruel.
Okay. Yellow Vest Act 16, Peter. What did you make of it?
They're still there, and that's what's most important, my attire. Okay, there we go. I'm in solidarity. Not because of, I get criticism for this, not because they're socialists or anything like that. No, it's called human agency. And people wanting to protect their culture and their civilization. I'm all for that, okay? That's where they find meaning. They don't find meaning through Macron's very expensive office. What a jerk. Nitwit, another one. You know, he's part of the same genetic code as Trudeau. I'll have a very lengthy, maybe even separate video on it, because my friend Xavier Moreau, a frequent guest on Crosstalk, who lives in Russia but travels obviously to France quite often. He's involved in he's involved in a major rally that will be happening later this month. And as I get details, I'll be filtering it to you guys, and maybe even we'll have him on from Paris to maybe give us a outline of what we can expect and what their goals are and how the movement has evolved since it started. And I think it would be better to speak with someone with such authority as that in the next couple of weeks.
Alexander, what do you make of Act 16?
Well, I think Peter's hit the nail on the head. I mean, the important thing is it's still happening. And the idea that it would go away, we've had a concerted media campaign against it. We discussed it recently in one of our programs. There have been attempts to discredit this movement by smearing its leaders as anti-Semites and by representing it as some sort of threat to public order. And yet it goes on. And this at a time when the entire European economy is beginning to turn south. So we're going to see a major crisis, I think, eventually in France. This is a rumbling. It's like a cloud in the distance where you can hear the lightning and the thunder rumbling away. And I think sooner or later it will come much closer, and then we will see whether Macron is able to survive the downpour. But that's what I think is happening.
All right,
well, even you know, another scenario here is we've mentioned quite often here is that it's very difficult to get rid of a French president. I mean, just by the way their constitution is built. But you know, one of the outcomes of all of this is that we're going to have a listless state. We're going to have a president that has no moral authority. And so that's one scenario that France is going to have to face. And you have Merkel checking out, thank God, very, very soon. And then you have paralysis in France. And these are the two pillars of the European Union. I don't know, maybe Brexit will be done by then. I don't know. Who knows? But this is a grim future for Europe because there's no quote unquote leadership.
No.
Okay, we're approaching 2 hours. We'll go for about another 10 minutes. So keep those questions coming, keep those super chats coming, and hit that like button. Guys, a super chat, Peter from Rainy Steps. What is Russia's stance on South Africa? They did have the farmers.
Right, well, Russia is acting more. Its actions speak more than its words. Russia's accepting South African, and I have to say it, white South African farmers to come and resettle in Russia. It's hard to describe the vast agricultural sector that's only getting better in Russia. I predict within 20 years, we're not going to be talking about who are the nuclear powers. We're going to be talking about who are the hydro powers and the food powers. Okay, and Russia is going to be both. Water and food, okay, because that's what the world needs most of all. And Russia is keeping a very close eye on it. You have all these great proclamations out of Western capitals about what's humane and what's not humane, but Russia's actions speak for itself. It's helping people that are in despair, and I think it's commendable.
All right, Andre, thank you for both your super chats. And Alexander, you want to follow up on that?
Very quickly, I mean, from a Russian point of view, obviously they will provide an open door for people who want to emigrate to Russia. You know, white people from South Africa to join the food thing. But South Africa itself, from the Russian point of view, is a BRICS partner state. It's and that's something that I think that the Russians. They don't have huge interests in that part of the world, but they do want to maintain a good, friendly relationship with South Africa, irrespective of who the president of the country is. That is very much the Russian style.
Alexander from PJ Newser wants to know what to make of the Orthodox Church, the Constantinople Russian Orthodox dispute with Ukraine as well. Any news on that?
Well, what has been happening, there's been two things. First of all, it's quite clear that the Orthodox Church, let's be quite clear about it, the canonical Orthodox Church, the church that has always existed in Ukraine, not this schismatic group that the Patriarch has recognized, it has remained solid. There has not been a vast flow of defections. Most of the parishes, I think I read somewhere only 12 parishes have seceded and joined the schismatic church, proving to be the great success that I think Poroshenko and the Patriarch in Constantinople expected that it would. The other thing that's happening is that it's becoming.
Oh, we lost Alexander again. No, we lost him for good.
Oh, no.
It's all right. We're wrapping up either way.
No, come back.
All right. The Oracle has vanished. I think that's our cue, Peter.
Okay.
That's our cue to wrap it up. We apologize for that, guys. We apologize for that. But we hit 2 hours pretty much exact. Andre, can you answer my question? Couldn't link it to Super Chat. Andre, can you put your question in the chat? I think I did not see it in the chat, but if you can write it real quick, Peter will try to answer. Let's see what it is. And then we'll sign off. So we'll take Andre's question and we'll sign it off. So Andre, if you're listening, send that question to the chat and we'll answer it. While we're waiting, Peter, what are you looking at for this week coming?
Well, when reflecting on the comment that John Bolton made about the Monroe Doctrine in light of forced regime change that we've seen, particularly since the end of the Cold War, and in reference to, I think this is the 64th or 65th attempted regime change by the United States in Latin and South America. So I want to talk about the road record of forced regime change and why never in America they ever talk about international law, because all what they're doing is against the law, against the sovereignty of another country. Venezuela has not attacked anyone at all. It doesn't deserve to be invaded, attacked by an outside power. Okay, and I want to delve into that, and I'm waiting for my producers to tell me who my guests are because I'm excited about it.
All right, Valley wants to know where is Skippy, so we have that as well, Peter.
They're sleeping.
Brexit, he's sleeping. And Ian wants to know about a Brexit comment. Actually, Ian, if you go back to the video, which will go up, we talked a lot about Brexit. Alexander and Peter talked at great length about Brexit in the first half of the show. So check that out. And the question from Andre Peter is actually very related to you. Visas to Russia. In the summer of 2018, I went on a motorcycle trip for a month, a big visa hassle. Had to get an official invite from the Russian entity and needed a visa broker.
I'm surprised to hear that, because for 2018 they had the World Cup and they had it all completely automated. Okay, it was automated and it was actually quite simple. And I came across particularly people from the UK that told me how simple it was. So I'm sorry to hear that happened.
So Andre, if that answers your question, I also do a lot of visas for Russia, and I've never had any issue getting a visa.
Maybe it was the motorcycle thing. Maybe that was it.
Yeah, sometimes you have to wait a couple of weeks, a week or two, depending on the visa that you get. If you're getting a tourist, it's pretty fast, 2 to 4 days. If you're getting a business visa, it may take a couple of weeks. And the Oracle has reappeared.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry, the connections are not great today. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you. Alexander, there were some questions about some more Brexit comments. Do you have anything that you didn't say in the first half of the show?
Well, go back to the first part, because that'll put everything into context. Okay, so
go to the first part. Is there any other comments that you want to make, Alexander, on Brexit?
What on the situation at the moment as it's evolving?
Aside from anything you didn't say on the first half.
I don't think so. I think, as I said, the chances are we're going to see Theresa May's deal pass, despite the fact that most people are so strongly opposed to it. But it's beginning to look increasingly as if people are coming round to the view that it's either that or no Brexit at all.
All right. So, and Peter, Andre says that I went on the motorcycle trip to Russia. The visa was available if you bought the soccer ticket. So maybe it was the whole World Cup thing was.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
Look, I would say, Andre, I think now that the World Cup is over, if you get the visa, now I think it's pretty normal now, pretty run of the mill to get the visa. Once again, maybe the motorcycle thing was
Well, the one tidbit here, I read this number, something 500 to 700 of the football fans never returned home. They like staying here so much, and now they're trying to find them. So tell them it's time to go. Okay.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, Andre, if it depends on the country that you're getting your visa from too. But anyway, Alexander, what are you looking at this week coming, and we'll sign off.
Yeah, what am I looking at? Well, Brexit I have to look at because, of course, it's such a big subject here, and I think that is something that we're going to get some clarity over the course of this week. Mueller, there's talk that he's about to report. We will see. There's even talk that he might report this week. We will see. I think that'll be big news when it happens. And the Middle East is always rumbling away, but the Venezuela issue, I think, is at the moment more center stage because, as Peter has said, this coup has not succeeded. In fact, it's visibly failed. So what are the neocons in the United States now? What are they going to do? What Bolton, Pompeo, and the rest? What next devilry have they planned?
Please finish the answer about the new church. We'll do a video on the Orthodox thing, Liago. So we'll do a whole video on the Orthodox thing. Me and Alexander to finish up.
Okay, I got to go, guys.
Because Peter has to go.
Yes.
So we'll finish up on that, guys. Thank you for the live chat.
Yes.
It was another great show, number 28. Thank you very much. We hope everyone has a good Monday and a good week ahead. Remember to hit that like button. Remember to subscribe. Hit the notifications bell. The Duran shop to pick up a shirt. You can donate on PayPal and Patreon. Thank you to all the super chats as well. In Moscow, host of RT's Crosstalk, Mr. Peter Lavelle. Thank you very much. Another great show. And in London, the Oracle of London, Mr. Alexander Mercouris. Alexander, thank you once again for another great show.
With apologies for the broken connections.
Little broken connection, but we'll do a video on that stuff, and Alexander will finish his thoughts on the church as well. Yeah. Thank you very much, guys, wherever you are. We hope you have a really good night, a good day, and a great week ahead. Thank you very much. Take care.